speech, like I said earlier, is the interception of perception. Every person has a different view of another person's image. That's all perception. From the character of a man to their integrity, that's who you are. College basketball coach Steve Alford made this statement while being interviewed about perception. And unfortunately for me, all through my life, I was kind of perceived as stale. And this stale perception haunted me for so long that I had no clue who I was at one point in time. And so I'm going to tell you this story about how I ended up figuring who I am as a person, how I conquered this perception. And I did it by not avoiding it, but actually intercepting this perception. Now, how do we do this? We do this by doing three things I like to call the 3 R's. We want to recognize, remind, and relate. We want to recognize this perception that haunts you, remind ourselves who we are as a person, and then relate it to something you believe in. So for me, I had to recognize what this stale perception was. And I say stale because it was an acronym, meaning S, senseless, T, I was called a thug, A, average, L, lazy, and E, egocentric, because I live it. But this stale perception haunted me for most of my life. It put doubt in my mind that I wasn't a person. I was somebody that was lower than everybody else. But this gave me the chance to be the underdog in any situation. It belittled me to the point where people started to underestimate me. Which brings me to my second R, remind. I had to remind myself of who I am, of the generation I grew up in. From Jack Andrica, a 16-year-old kid that found a cheap way to find pancreatic cancer, to an 18-year-old named Renee Silva, who brought the world out to the mass destruction in Brazil. These are people that are part of my generation. They're powerful individuals. And Nelson Mandela said it best when he said, our deepest fear is not that we are adequate, but our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. And we ask ourselves, who am I to be gifted, talented, gorgeous? Actually, who are you not to be? You're a child of God, but playing small does not serve the world. And just being a child of God just gives me to my third and final point, relating it to something you believe in. And for me, as a Christian, I had to relate it to God's Word. And growing up in church, I always thought and I always believed that the Bible was an acronym which stood for Basic Instructions Before Leaving Earth. Bible. And one instruction that stood out to me the most out of everything we did was Romans 12:2. It says, and be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you can seek everything good, perfect, and the will of God. This instruction, this verse in the Bible just says that you can't let the world define who you are as a person. And that's what I had to realize, being haunted by this stale perception, that we have to believe in ourselves before we can believe in anybody else. And that's exactly what I had to do. So as soon as I realized that this stale perception could not haunt me any longer, I started to become myself. I started to figure out who I was. I started to figure out that I was a person that could get up in front of a crowd and speak. I started to figure out that I was a person that could make friends wherever I wanted to. I could just express myself the way I was, and that's what I decided to do. So I encourage you all to do the same thing I did, which is recognize, remind, and relate to yourself. And it'll show you that you are destined for greatness. Thank you.